So the whole dragging the TV box thing in has been fun, but to be honest with you, it's skunking up the carpet, and plus, your boy is tired. So, here we go. Samsung QN90C, we're gonna do a full unboxing, setup, and review of this TV. But first, I've gotta fix this mic situation. This is ridiculous. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison. As I said before, we're gonna be checking out the Samsung QN90C today. I think this is the premium Samsung QLED TV most folks are likely to buy. The QN95C offers a few more bells and whistles, probably slightly better performance as well. But man, it costs a lot more. Speaking of cost though, that's gonna be an issue for this particular TV because as many of you know, and if you don't know, I just reviewed the TCL QM8. We're working on the Hisense U8K as well. Both highly competitive TVs for significantly less than the QN90C here. What kind of premiumness does this TV offer for its significantly elevated price? We're about to find out. But before we find that out, I've got to unbox this thing and set up. So let's get that part out of the way. What do we have here? I'm sure I will be shocked. Part of the stand, quick setup guide, which I'll ignore until I can't anymore, and remote, batteries, and screws. That's a good start. Lift this guy on my own. So smooth. It's almost like I've done this before. I'll hand it to Samsung. Their stands are pretty solid, relatively easy to put together, so we should be, woo, hey! This is, it's solid is what it is. I mean, it's plastic, but it's solid. And I have a lot more confidence in the stability of this TV before I've even set it up. So that's why I talk about those touch points sometimes, is because, you know, they're important. Good grief. No one can ever accuse Samsung of not securing the living daylights out of their screws. Good night. This guy up here. There's got to be a cover plate or something that lets me access the screws. There we go. Time to screw with power. Somebody was asking who makes the powered screwdriver, which is such an interesting request. Like, I'm not giving this thing a huge endorsement or anything like that, but it's just a Black & Decker. We'll get that later. Yeah, it's just a Black & Decker. You know, it does the job. It doesn't have a ton of torque. So we're not going to accidentally over tighten anything or strip any screw heads out, which we're going to need a manual screwdriver here because we cannot reach in. Just a second. All right, so yeah, this is easy enough. 4 screws go into the collar, we'll call it, that affixes to the base. And then this will go right in the back of the TV, 4 screws there, and then we should be up and running here. I mentioned earlier that we're gonna need to count just about every premium touch point this TV has, because frankly, I feel like we're either going to justify the price of this TV or we're not. Like even just laying this TV down, it felt solid. The backing on this TV, as we'll show you here in a moment, is really nice, but I get ahead of myself. Let's get this thing on the stand. All right, so I was just talking about overall build quality, but as Chris pointed out, this guy wobbles a little bit, which some wobble is going to be of concern. Not so much here. This is built pretty solid. It's got some give. For those of you in earthquake zones, you know, it'll wobble a bit before it finally tips over and breaks. I'm kidding. I don't know what I'm talking about. Fact of the matter is, some TVs wobble. Some TV wobble is worse than others. I consider this to be on the better end of the spectrum. 4 HDMI inputs here. All of them support up to 144 Hertz at 4K, so you're not having to sacrifice anything with this TV. It's loaded for gaming, and it starts there at the 4K 144 Hertz, and we'll see later some of the gaming specific features that this TV has to offer. At any rate, attractive enough. We've got some channels here for cable management, although I will say that they're a little on the thin side. I don't know about you guys, but most of my HDMI cables are thicker than one of these channels. So nice thought, but I don't know how useful it's gonna be. And then you put this guy right here to obscure them. Everything trails out the back of the column. Let's turn this around and get the plastic off. Oh yeah, quick word on the remote. If you weren't already aware, this thing is solar chargeable. Presumably you won't ever have to replace the batteries. You can't change them out. They're not user serviceable. So yeah, I suppose this remote's gonna last as long as the rechargeable batteries inside it last. And Samsung has a good track history with rechargeable batteries, right? So when we first turn the TV on, we're going to get some voice prompts for assistance. I'm gonna go ahead and start the setup process here. And what you'll notice is there's a good 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your internet connection, update that needs to happen. So we'll let that go. And then what happened next, I was not expecting. So for a while now, Samsung's Tizen Smart TV interface has supported free ad-supported streaming television, or FAST TV. This is stuff that you get from Pluto, for example, or Freevee. There are a number of these different services. Samsung puts that front and center. That part is not new. What is new, I think, is that it just automatically launches into that TV. So without selecting anything at all, it's making this Nickelodeon channel available, and then it just goes full screen without me selecting it at all, which I do not care for. All right, so setting that annoyance aside for a minute, first thing I want to do is change the picture setting, because out of the box, it's going to be in eco mode. After first click, it goes into movie mode. There's also filmmaker mode, and of course, dynamic and standard. You can pick what you like best, but get out of the eco mode because it's going to cap the maximum brightness of the TV. I'm going to go with movie for now because that is usually fairly reliable. I know what to expect from filmmaker. I want to see what kind of action I get out of movie mode. Now, right now it's playing that fast TV stuff. I'm going to want to go into some of the apps and make settings specific for HDR and Dolby Vision, and we'll see if my SDR settings carry over or not. So I realize I just made a gaffe. Samsung doesn't support Dolby Vision, so we won't be making any Dolby Vision settings at all. We'll just do HDR here. So I've queued up Ozark on Netflix because it's an HDR, and we'll go ahead and navigate our way to the picture settings, and we're in the movie HDR picture mode. So that's great. If I want to dig deeper, I'm going to have to move all the way over here to get to full settings. There we go. Yeah, Samsung does make it a little bit more complicated to get to the full menu. I mean, its quick menu is usable, but if you want to go deeper, you got to click a lot of times. So here, local dimming is currently set to standard. We'll mess around with that for the full review. HDR and tone mapping is set to active. I imagine we're going to want to go with static eventually, but I'm going to leave it as it is for now to gauge its performance. Everything else looks fine. I want to double check that we don't have any motion smoothing on. Picture clarity settings are on custom. We do. So I'm going to turn that off. You guys know how I roll. So that'll take care of HDR on pretty much every streaming service that there is. So I give Samsung's Tizen Smart TV OS a lot of grief because it's very advertising forward. Also, it takes a lot of clicks to get where you want to go sometimes, as I just showed you. But on the positive side of that, it is modernized enough that you get the best version of most of the streaming apps. So Netflix, for example, I opened up the app, I scanned a QR code, boom, I was instantly logged in. And that's true for most of these apps. If there's an easy way to get logged in, it's going to be available here, which is not something that I can say for competing smart TV platforms. Also, I do have to mention that I appreciate the fact that once I make a picture setting selection in SDR, it carries that selection over to HDR as well. And it applies to all of the apps. So I don't have to log into each individual app and make custom settings for all of them. Okay, review time. And for those of you who watch a lot of my TV review videos, just want to mention that this one may feel a little bit different than the ones I've done in the past because a lot of what I have to say doesn't fit into the typical little organizational boxes that I try to use. So stick with me. I think it's important though. So I mentioned earlier that a common thread in this video would be around what you get when paying a premium for this Samsung TV. And we'll stick with that. But As I evaluated this TV, it occurred to me that there's another topic we should talk about as well. So let's start with that. On paper, the QN90C looks more like last year's QN85B than it does a straight replacement for last year's QN90B. I'll get into the details around that shortly, but for now, I just wanted to say that I understand anyone who might think that the QN90C here was somehow downgraded, but the reality is a little more involved than that. See, two things are at play here. At the corporate level, Samsung restructured its TV lineup for 2023. But at the consumer level, the QN90C is kind of Samsung's response to what we asked for. Yes, we, the TV enthusiast community, asked for certain things, and Samsung delivered them in the QN90C. First, the restructuring thing. Last year, the QN95B was not destined for the North American market. The QN90B was supposed to be the 4K QLED flagship for the North American market, but enough folks made enough noise that Samsung ended up bringing the QN95B to the US and Canada, and it wound up being the top 4K QLED for 2022. So in a way, the QN90B got knocked down a peg in the lineup for last year. This year, the QN95C was planned to be the top 4K QLED for 2023. It's got more dimming zones, a more elaborate speaker system, slightly higher peak brightness, and a few other bells and whistles. That means that the QN90C that we're reviewing here has to be a step down, and that means that it looks a little more like last year's QN85B. But also, Samsung made a few technological changes in response to our requests and/or complaints. Again, our and we in this context refers to the TV enthusiast community made up of reviewers like me and vocal viewers like you. Notably, the QN90C here doesn't have the same anti-glare technology that the QN90B had last year. See, while Samsung's best anti-glare technology is extremely effective at reducing reflections, it has this side effect of scattering ambient light in such a way that it results in a sort of faded rainbow effect, and some folks complained about that. Taking things a step further, that anti-glare technology is tied into Samsung's off-angle improvement technology, which is why you see Samsung marketing anti-glare with ultra viewing angle. So Samsung dropped that technology for the QN90C here, but they still wanted to have improved off-angle viewing. As such, Samsung is using what's called an ADS LCD panel on this TV. ADS is similar to LG's IPS, which is known for having inherently better off-angle viewing than the very common VA panel type that we talk about all the time. Now, historically, the problem with ADS and IPS has been that black levels weren't as good. But with mini LED backlighting tech, ADS and IPS panels can have excellent black levels and black uniformity while also offering great off-angle viewing. So what we have here is a TV that doesn't have the rainbow effect from Samsung's anti-glare tech, but still has good off-angle viewing and great black levels. Unfortunately, the anti-glare treatment that this TV does have isn't as effective, so reflections can be visible. Trade-offs, folks. TV design is and always has been about making trade-offs. Next on the we asked for it list is the QN90C's slightly lower average picture level or overall brightness. Stick with me here. Now, don't get me wrong, as I'll soon discuss, this TV still gets plenty bright. But you may recall last year that many reviewers complained that Samsung's HDR TVs were over-brightening everything, abandoning the creator's intent and, in tandem, accuracy. Well, this year, if you put the QN90C in filmmaker mode, it tracks the EOTF, or electro-optical transfer function, very well. In other words, it makes an HDR picture that's just as bright as it's told to make it without adding anything. Now, you can get the TV to be brighter. You can start by picking the movie mode. You can make sure the HDR tone mapping setting is set to active instead of static. That option alone is new and by our request, by the way. And you can engage settings like dynamic contrast, all in an effort to over-brighten the picture if that's what you like. But Samsung gave us what we asked for by letting us decide whether we got an exuberant, technically over-brightened picture or one that complies with the standards of accuracy. As for the slightly lower brightness specs over last year's QN90B, well, remember that the QN95C is now the top dog for 2023, and so the ultimate brightness potential is reserved for that more expensive set. All of that to say that while the QN90B last year was considered by many, including myself, to be the best alternative to OLED that you could buy in a 4K TV, that distinction now probably lay with the QN95C this year. But that doesn't mean that the QN90C here is any kind of slouch. Quite the contrary. It's an excellent TV. The question I think most folks would ask is whether it is better than its much less expensive competition. Well, I'll just answer that question right now. Yes, in many ways, the QN90C is a bit better than the TCL QM8 or Hisense U8K. Most notably, its upscaling and picture cleanup processing is better than either the TCL or Hisense TVs. When I watch low resolution and low bit depth content, note it's about bit depth, not just bit rate, the Samsung does a better job of smoothing out color banding, pixelization, and posterization, all of which are fancy display nerd terms for stuff that makes for a dirty, fuzzy looking picture. The QN90C has a very clean, crisp image when playing back less than awesome content from sources like Sling TV, UTV, or cable.
Meine Dispatcher says there's something wrong with deine Kabel.
Yes, there is definitely something wrong with deine Kabel, but the Samsung prevents you from knowing that it's ever a problem. So for everyday TV viewing, the Samsung QN90C is a bit better than its cheaper competition. It's also got better out-of-box color accuracy and color temperature when using the movie mode or filmmaker mode. And if you want to have it calibrated to perfection, all the controls you need are right there. The QN90C, being a Samsung QLED TV, also has 4 full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports that support 4K resolution all the way up to 144 Hz with just about every flavor of VRR, or variable refresh rate, that you could want. And Samsung has a pretty handy gaming dashboard to further appeal to gamers. Now, its gaming picture preset leaves a little bit to be desired. I noticed that the backlight control system doesn't seem to be as effective in game mode as it is in the movie or filmmaker mode picture presets, and it tends to look over brightened to me. You lose a bit of bright highlight detail too. But overall, I have to admit that the QN90C outperforms its competition in many key ways. It's got a gorgeous picture, highly impactful HDR highlights with good highlight detail, great contrast, and black levels are excellent with no perceivable black crushing going on, so you keep all your low light details too. The TV peaks at about 2000 nits for SDR and HDR, and it comes in just under 700 nits full screen white, which is very bright. And considering how bright it can get, blooming and halo is very well controlled. I mean, you will see some blooming and halo when you have small, intensely bright objects on very large, dark backgrounds, especially off angle. But like the black letterbox bars stay black, and you don't see a massive bloom when you engage white subtitles over the letterbox bars the way that you will see on some TVs. My only complaint from a non-picture performance perspective is around Tizen, which I could just do without, especially that autoplay video thing that I talked about during the setup section. That's bad on the internet and it's bad on your TV. And I still haven't found a way to turn that off. But if I do, I'll pin a comment down below. Now, moving forward, I'm gonna dig into a direct comparison between the Samsung QN90C and the TCL QM8. That's for a future video. And I'll let you decide whether the Samsung earns its premium price. But I hope I've made it clear to you that you definitely do get a bit more from the Samsung. Whether you value those improvements enough to spend a lot more is entirely up to you. With all of that said, when we get out of the weeds and get up to a 10,000 foot perspective, there's no doubt that the QN90C is a really excellent TV and very much what I expected from Samsung. I was immensely impressed the first time I saw this TV, and I'm still very impressed, and that doesn't always happen. One of the things I like most about it is that you don't need to root around in the picture settings a bunch to get a great picture. Just pick movie or filmmaker mode, whichever you like better, and enjoy. The QN90C is the premium Samsung TV I think most folks should consider buying, and it is definitely a shortlist TV for anyone who values premium picture quality. Quick sidebar about the sound quality, and I'm just kind of injecting this in, so if it doesn't really line up with the rest of the video, I'm sorry, I almost forgot to mention it, but the sound quality is fine. I mean, honestly, the best thing about Samsung's sound solutions is that the TV works with its sound bars to enhance the overall audio field. So really, you kind of want to get a Samsung sound bar to enhance the audio of this TV. But it's passable. You can hear stuff and dialogue is reasonably intelligible. It's just, you spend a lot of money on a TV, you want to have really great sound quality. And unfortunately, that's just not a thing these days. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What do you think of my QN90C review? Let me know down in the comments what I didn't cover that you'd like to see covered in the Versus video that's coming up soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.